From the lowest to the highest, from the furthest to the nearest, from the smallest of the smallest to the greatest of the greatest, yoga is about all of life, everything we do, all of existence. My name's James Bogue. Welcome to the Whole Life Yoga Podcast. Today, the topic is faith, or more accurately, the Sanskrit word śraddhā, which often gets translated as faith, but as we'll see, points in directions that the English so-called equivalent faith doesn't always point. So if you hear, for example, you've got to have faith, what do you think of? What does this word faith immediately connote? Often for people in the Anglophone world, this word faith has associations to do with belief or religion. And believing something that you're not sure of, for example. Or trusting something that you don't really know. And these are all parts of what faith could perhaps represent. But the Sanskrit word śraddhā and the idea of faith as an essential quality for the yoga practitioner is different from this. And the Sanskrit term is a very beautiful one, śraddhā. And śraddhā is related etymologically in the Sanskrit to the word hrit, which means heart. So śraddhā is the faith, the confidence, the self-trust, as Eric Schiffman, a contemporary American yoga teacher, that's the way he translates it, and I really like that translation. Śraddhā is the faith, confidence, conviction, self-trust that comes from putting things to a most thorough test in the realm of your own lived experience. So śraddhā is not about blind faith. It's not about believing in something because it sounds nice or comforting or plausible. Rather, śraddhā is the self-trust, the self-belief that comes from putting things to the test in the arena of your own life, from testing it in the laboratory of your own experience. And it is said in the Yoga Sutra that this is mentioned in the Yoga Sutra as the very first quality that is essential for yoga practice. So you've got to have faith, you've got to have self-trust. Why? Why is self-trust, why is faith so important for yoga practice? Well, it's also helpful in this context, I would say, to mention the very next quality that Patañjali mentions in the Yoga Sutra as being absolutely essential for the yoga practitioner. And that is also represented by a very beautiful Sanskrit word, vīrya. And vīrya is the quality of a vīra, or a vīra in the feminine. And a vīra means a hero or a heroine. It can also mean somebody who is very vigorous, who has lots of valor, who has tremendous courage and fortitude. But vīra also means in Sanskrit, it also denotes human being. And I find this so beautiful because it's like the word itself is telling us that in order to be fully human, we have to be heroes. We have to be heroic. We have to muster courage and heroic valor. And what does this mean? In order to be fully ourselves, we will have to do things that we have not done before. We will have to step beyond the known confines of our experienced up to now comfort zone. Now, sometimes when people hear the word hero, they think, oh, those are characters in a story or a movie or a cartoon. What's that got to do with me and my life? Well, from the yogic perspective, everything. And from the yogic perspective, each of us is already initiated into the way of the spiritual hero, or the spiritual warrior, you might even say. Because where does each of us come from? Where do you come from? Of course, we can answer that question by saying a location in geographical space, like I, for example, was born in the country that is now often referred to as England, in the East Riding of Yorkshire. But I could also say quite accurately, there are many accurate ways to answer that question, of course, but another perfectly accurate way, and the way that I think is most fitting for this context is to say, I come from the very same place you do. I come from the womb, just like you. We all came from the womb. And how was it in the womb? Do you remember? It's the archetypal comfort zone, the womb, because it's all we've ever known. And all our immediate needs and expectations were met. Constant food supply, steady temperature, mama's heart, the gentle percussion to our day-to-day. And again, I'll reiterate, it's all we've ever known. And yet, even though it was all we've ever known, somehow from somewhere deep inside, we had this sense there must be something more than this. And then we did something truly heroic, because it was getting a little bit confined in there, yes? Now, I don't know about you, but in my life, I have felt confined in a comfort zone of my up to now held viewpoints, perspectives, limiting ideas. And sometimes I've not had the temerity to break through and take the heroic, courageous step into the vaster reaches of existence that are waiting for me to step into them. But when we were in the womb, something heroic inside us pushed us onwards, and we forced our way, we made our way courageously into a place of greater constriction, into the birth canal, that long dark tunnel, to then emerge into the breathing world. And we breathe in and then we breathe out, most likely with sound, and as such we are then initiated into this breathing, pulsating, cycling world and the realm of nature, that which is born, which will die, and in between those two great changes of birth and death will be subject to constant change. And so our emergence into this breathing world was itself a heroic, valorous, courageous act. We went from the previously known, comfortable, familiar, to something way vaster. And we managed to do it. Here we are. Maybe that process was not as uninterfered with as perhaps would have been optimal. Perhaps our mother was in a medical setting where she had some of her faculties numbed and so wasn't able to give us the type of symbiotic support and feedback that we wanted, and we felt a bit abandoned at that time. Maybe we were pulled out before we were really ready. Maybe we had to be pulled out in some type of emergency. Who knows? But nonetheless, here we are. It might not have been the most perfect birth, but we made it here. Now, if we were very, very lucky in the context of the world today, not only would we have been left to our own sweet timing in how we emerged, but then once we had emerged, we would have been allowed to go on our first great adventure in the breathing, pulsating world and follow the map on our mother's body. Because the pregnant mother, down the centre of her abdomen is the linea negra, the dark line, and the areolae around her breasts are darkened. The young babe, the sense of vision is still very undeveloped, but the baby can perceive that light and shade. And there is this map. And so I have not had this experience myself, but I have been told about it by friends of mine who work a lot in the birth room, doulas, and mothers and fathers who have witnessed this. And it's so moving to listen to them describe this, that the baby comes out and is placed on mother's belly. And then the baby gently wriggles up mother's belly, giving a massage to all of that internal viscera that so much has just been happening there, and gives this perfectly adapted to the situation massage to her internal organs, so the uterus can begin to do the amazing reconstitution of what's going on inside. And then the baby, meanwhile, makes its way up following the map, and it follows la linea negra, and then it latches onto the breast. Oh, this can happen. Many people have told me of their experience witnessing this. And then the baby has had the self-affirming experience that I can find what I need in this world. I belong here. And mother and father, if he is also present, they also have this amazing experience of seeing our child is not an entirely helpless or defenseless creature. Of course, for quite some time, we are going to have to do quite a lot to support this young being who is, relatively speaking, defenseless and extraordinarily vulnerable, but nonetheless, she is endowed with a tremendous intelligence of life and intuitive wisdom, which is already manifesting in her capacity to seek out with laser-like precision what she really needs, what he really needs for his deep nourishment and his growth and his satisfaction and his expansion and his onward progress in this journey of life. Now, I don't think it was like that when I came out, and I know many other people of my generation and younger who were born in a hospital, and many of the amazing processes which occur in, let's say, a more natural birth setting were denied to the parents and to the child. And that can beget a trauma for the child and for the parents. Nonetheless, here we are. Now, imagine if we'd had that archetypal, beautiful experience and we'd been initiated into the way of the spiritual hero and warrior, not just in the way we came out of the womb into the breathing world, but then going on that first adventurous journey up the Negra to latch on and drink and eat, as it were. What happens in the very first steps of life to our sense of śraddhā, our sense of self-trust, our sense of having all the intelligence we need to live in rhythm and harmony with our deeper longings, our deeper needs, and find a way to not only stay alive, but thrive in this beautiful realm of bodily, earthly, incarnate existence? It would, I would suggest, bolster our sense of belonging and having everything we need to be part of this miracle called life. And then, as we grow, if we have further experiences where we take risks and we recognize, we can, this bolsters our self-trust. But what's the situation in the world today? So many of us, through our childhood, our self-trust gets attenuated and weakened. Because often, when our intuitive wisdom tells us to do something, the societal forces, the parents, the school rules, the guardians tell us, no, don't do that. So, for example, a young child really wants to move around, explore their burgeoning physical capacities, and maybe the adult's caregivers say, sit still. Or perhaps the young child is developing their linguistic capacity. They want to talk, or their analytical capacity. They want to ask difficult, awkward questions, and the adults say, shut up, be quiet, put a sock in it. Stop asking questions. Things like this. What then happens to the young human's self-trust? It starts to get interfered with. And according to the Yoga Shastra, the foundational teachings of yoga, this self-trust, this confidence, this faith, this conviction, this is the first essential quality for practice. So yoga begins when we acknowledge that we don't have things all worked out. We are not in the most harmonious rhythmic state that we could be, and we could do something about it. But in order to do something about it, this faith, this confidence, this conviction, this courageousness, this valor is going to be really, really helpful. Now, some might say, well, some people just have that. Perhaps. Yoga is always very pragmatic. So I would suggest we can bolster our śraddhā, we can strengthen and fortify our courage. How do we do this? There's lots of practical ways. One is that we start inviting greater cohesion between our thought, our word, and our action. There's this beautiful proverb or subhashita, a wise saying in Sanskrit. It says, Manasyekam vachasyekam karmanyekam mahatmana manasyanyat vachasyanyat karmanyanyat duratmana. What does it mean? A person whose manas, whose thought, whose vach, whose speech, and whose karma, whose action is one, that is a great soul. However, somebody whose thoughts are in one place, whose speech is saying, whose words are saying something else again, and whose actions are something else again, that is a soul in torment. How true this is. And so, let us cultivate greater cohesion between our thought, our word, and our action. And we can practice this. One way we can start practicing is by making promises to ourselves that we can keep. But we can scale this practice. We can start close. We can start with things that we can already start to be affirming our self-trust. For example, I'm brushing my teeth. I tell me I'm brushing my teeth. I'm moving my hand. I'm allowing the toothbrush to apply an appropriate amount of pressure. And as I'm doing it, I'm saying I'm doing it. I'm noticing I'm doing it. I'm aligning my thought, my attention, my words. I'm inviting that deeper cohesion. And then and now I'm going to stop brushing my teeth. And I stop brushing my teeth. I make a micro promise to myself and I keep it. And then I drink some water. And then I say, I'm now going to go outside and look at the sunrise, for example. And then I do it. So but I start close in. I start with things that I can guarantee success. For example, if I say tonight, tomorrow, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this, and this. I don't know about you, but I've sometimes had the experience of one evening, one night, going to bed, feeling resolved. Yes, tomorrow I'm going to undertake that particular project and finish those tasks. Let's say call them tasks A, B, C, and D. Anyway, I go to sleep. And come the morning, the person that wakes up, the version of me that awakens the next morning, has no interest in A, B, C, or D. And E, F, G, H, the rest of the alphabet, has so much more allure than those tasks I felt so resolute on the evening before. What to do about this? Well, this is the idea in yoga. We are a conglomeration of cells, and they function together really rather well. However, we can feel ourselves pulled in lots of different directions. So yoga is about inviting that greater harmony, cohesion, rhythm, and balance. So all these different parts that constitute this miraculous conglomerate whole of our being can learn to function like a beautiful orchestra who know how to play together in symphony, in accord, in harmony. And that takes practice. So one way we can practice is by making these promises to ourselves that we can keep. And we can start with this very simple thing. Whatever I'm doing, I can just observe it, notice my thoughts, and invite that cohesion between my thought, my vocal expression, and my physical expression. And once I develop some proficiency and familiarity with that, maybe I become a little bit more ambitious. Then I say, later, by this time today, I will have completed this. And I complete it. And I deepen my self-trust. And then maybe I get even more ambitious, this week, tomorrow, for example. And I make promises to myself that I keep. And once I'm really confident I'm keeping my promises to myself, then I can make promises to others and keep them. And what happens to my self-trust? It deepens. So this is one way we can really bolster our śraddhā, our self-trust, which is so helpful for yoga practice, because when we start practicing, sooner or later, we are going to come to these junctures where we'll have to go beyond the previously known. When we invite that greater harmony and cohesion into the field of our awareness, which is the basic aim of yoga practice, we're going to start seeing things that previously we were perhaps blind to. So that in the yoga tradition, they use this beautiful image of a lake. Like our awareness is like a lake. And oftentimes, ordinarily speaking, all of the busyness of day-to-day life, it means the surface level of our awareness is busy. It's like there's wind playing on the surface of the lake. So if we go to that lake and we look into it, we don't see very deep because it's also ruffled on the surface. But then we start to practice. We start to invite steadiness, integration, balance, cohesion through all the layers of our being. And so then the surface level, when we do that practice, when we meditate, for example, invite ourselves into the medi state, the state of being centered, balanced, integrated, the surface level of our awareness starts to quieten, becomes more serene. And then it's like the surface of the lake becomes still. So now if we go to the surface and we look in, what do we see? So much more than before. We may see all the way to the glorious depths of our being. We may get a glimpse of that light at the heart of ourself that never goes out. We might get glimpses of that. But that's not the only thing that we'll see, if we see that at all. What else are we going to see when the surface quietens and we can see deeper into the core of our being? Ooh, whoa. Underneath the surface of the lake, whoa. Ah, there's so much trash down there. How did I allow it to get so polluted? Oh no, I've got loads of cleaning out to do. And we start cleaning and then, whoa, no, it's not just a lot of trash down there. There's this whole sub-aqua cave network. Wow. Oh, and in those caves, monsters, dragons, all sorts of things that have been buried in the recesses of our psyche. And now they are emerging. Why are they emerging? Because we've asked for it. Because we've started practicing yoga. We've started telling our system that we're in the harmonization game. And so now are being brought to the surface those very tendencies and habits that we have been harboring that would impede or get in the way of our sustained experience of balance, harmony, clarity, and integration. And so we're going to have to wrestle with these monsters. We're going to have to wrestle with these forces or these tendencies inside us that do not necessarily accord with the vision or idea of ourself that we have held all this time. And that is going to require courage. It's going to be a lot to swallow. And it's going to challenge us. So we need to be courageous and we need to have faith that we're on the right path. But Patañjali, the great sage who gives us the Yoga Sutra, tells us when we courageously, in good faith, wholeheartedly explore what it means to be ourselves, what it means to be part of life. And we look into the deeper recesses of our being, when we cultivate that harmony and we bring to the surface those tendencies that have been hiding inside that would disrupt or interfere with that deeper harmony. When we heed the guidance, the directives of our conscience, it's always its own reward. So when we courageously bring ourselves into cohesion and act in accord with our own conscience, we build up a memory bank that it is worth it. This type of practice is its own reward. This steady, ongoing, patient, persistent harmonization of these different deepening layers of our psyche is worth it, even when it's intimidating, even when it turns our stomach, even when it confronts us with things that we prefer not to have to deal with. It's worth the effort. And the deeper we go, the more we continue this practice, the more we strengthen our resolve, the more we establish our courage. So we're ready to face deeper challenges and take on deeper levels of harmonization. And in order to do this, we're going to need to have this faith. And so we cultivate samadhi. We cultivate that balanced, integrated awareness. This gives us an experience that, this balanced, integrated awareness is something available within me. It's a capacity of my individual being. I can access it. And it's worthwhile accessing, because it helps me see more clearly. It makes my life richer, deeper, even though it's challenging. It's worth it. And so the practice starts to develop this self-propelling momentum. But nonetheless, it doesn't just mean that once we've been through this process one time, it's going to get easy. Actually, sometimes it will feel like it's getting harder because once we start to generate the momentum around that practice, we're basically sending the message to the whole field of our being. Yes, I'm in the integration, harmonization game. I would like to remove those I would like to harmonize and integrate those tendencies that up to now have been getting in my own way. And so basically it's like sometimes in yoga people sing peace mantras, and we sing Om Shanti, 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 Shanti meaning peace. So we're asking for peace, but at the same time we're also asking for trouble. Because when we're praying for peace, basically we're saying, I am ready to face and integrate so I may harmonize those tendencies that I've been harboring inside me that would get in the way of my experiencing a continued peace. So I'm asking for trouble. I'm asking for the opportunity to bring a reconciliation and healing where previously there's been division and fragmentation. Yoga, through practice, gives us the proof that we are able to reconcile that which would seem impossible to reconcile. So many examples through the yoga tradition, but even, for example, the archetypal form of Ganesha, the huge elephant's head on the human body, it contravenes all the laws of physics and logic, purposefully to remind us that sometimes what would appear to be the limits, according to our limited understanding of logic and physics, are not the limits. There are other things that can be factors in our experience. And just because things have been a certain way up to now doesn't mean they cannot be something very different if we allow ourselves to step with openness and wonder and curiosity into a field of active exploration. Similarly, Ganesha, his vehicle, his vāhana, is the big elephant-headed guy, is the mūshika, is the mouse or the rat. Now, obviously, again, how does a huge elephant-headed being ride on a tiny little mouse? There are many, many layers to this symbolism, but one of the ideas is that this form, Ganesha, which Ganesha is a symbol of yoga, Gana means group or member of a group, Isha, the one that can lead, that can bring into harmony all those members of the gang of our being. And when we bring all the members of the gang of our being into togetherness, then the sum is that much greater than all the parts. We are able to access capacities that perhaps previously we wouldn't even have imagined we had. It's that when the whole orchestra plays together, it can make all sorts of sounds that even the best instrumentalists cannot replicate by themselves. But if we are to do this, it's going to take śraddhā. It's going to take this faithfulness to explore in good faith how we can bring ourselves into deeper resonance, deeper togetherness, how we can include and harmonize all parts of ourselves, all the members of the gang of our being, including those parts of ourselves that may have been oppressed, repressed, suppressed, denied for so long, including those parts of ourselves that have just hung back in the recessive shadowlands of our psychic reality and now are being called into the light, and it's rather disturbing. All of these parts, the integration of all of them. This is the way of yoga. And sometimes when we're on this yogic path, when we're making our efforts to foster that steadiness, that balance, that clarity, that integration, sometimes it can feel rather overwhelming. And we may even, and this has certainly been the case for me, sometimes I question my capacity to do it. And so one beautiful, simple, always available as long as we're alive practice to help bolster our faith, our self-trust, is this simple practice of what I sometimes refer to as cultivating the gentle, steady breeze, even amidst the storms of life. And what do I mean? Basically, by allowing ourselves to observe the mysterious, wonderful phenomena of the expert capacity of our body to breathe. Just observing our breath, but observing a very healthy, grounding, diaphragmatic parasympathetic nervous system activating diaphragmatic breath. And so sometimes in the world today, people get into paradoxical breathing where we're overusing the chest and the upper intercostal muscles, all these secondary breathing muscles that generally only really are required when we're sprinting for our lives, like the fight or flight breath, where we really want to take maximum breaths. But the body is a very efficient breathing piece of apparatus. And we don't need to take big, huge breaths. But we can take these easy, generous, slow breaths. And so to invite the body into that very efficient, nourishing, diaphragmatic breath, which we'll feel moving in the abdomen, the belly, and the lower floating ribs on the side of the body, there are some steps that I find very helpful. One is to lie on one's belly and make loose fists and place one fist on top of the opposite elbow to make a shelf for one's forehead. And then lie down and rest the forehead on the upper of the two forearms. And just take a few breaths there. And the position of the body and the slight curvature in the spine is going to really invite that diaphragmatic breath. It really creates space for that belly breath. And so you'll feel, often this works very quickly, you'll feel the breath start to move in the abdomen and the lower back. And this is already very calming. And it's inviting the body to breathe in that easier way that's driven by the diaphragm. We allow the diaphragm to express its beautiful, masterful capacities. And once that's established, perhaps we then turn onto the back of the body. We might bend our knees, so the feet are flat on the ground, the legs are kind of supporting themselves. We might put one hand on the abdomen, around the, maybe so it's around the belly button, or a bit lower towards the pelvis, and the other hand on the chest. And the hand on the chest is not going to move, but we'll feel the breath moving in the lower part of the torso as the diaphragm expands and the belly expands into the lower of our two hands around our abdomen. And once we feel that's very established, perhaps we might then stand up and lean against a wall, perhaps with our feet about 1 foot away from the wall. Place the hands on the waist, so maybe the fingers and thumbs can feel the lowest of the floating ribs, and the other fingers are on the kind of waist area, and we feel the breath expanding into the fingers as we continue to breathe in the diaphragm. And then maybe we stand up just in space without leaning back, and then perhaps we come to sit. But if we do sit, we want to make sure we've got space for the body to breathe easefully. So making sure the knees are no higher than the hips. We might kind of perch on the edge of the chair or sit on the ground in a way that provides that roominess for the abdomen and the whole length of the spine. And again, we just observe the body breathing. And as we observe the body breathing, it's kind of like, I am part of life, and life knows how to live, so I belong here. I am worthy of being here because this bodily vehicle that was given to me, I wasn't involved in its creation. This bodily vehicle knows how to live. It knows how to do so many things that we still haven't the faintest idea how the body really does it, how it assimilates and transmutes the things we take in, the nutrients from the air, from the fluids, from the solids that we ingest and we eat, all these different flavors that come in, how the body transforms it. We are living, walking miracles. And when we observe our body breathing, we recognize what a generous chariot, what an amazing vehicle this body is. And when we observe it, we start again to invite that cohesion between our mind, we might say, or our awareness, our mental or internal awareness, and the bodily vehicle. So again, it's bringing this resonant harmony between these different layers of our individuality. Our sense intelligence, our internal intelligence, our bodily intelligence, and we're inviting them into greater attunement, greater at-one-ment. We're inviting that greater harmony, that greater balance. So the beautiful thing is that as we practice yoga, we practice this attunement, this harmonization. When we practice this attunement and harmonization, it bolsters our śraddhā, it bolsters our faith, it bolsters our vīrya, It makes us more courageous because we trust ourselves more. And so, as that practice in turn brings up greater challenges, we are prepared. We are ready. And this is the mechanism of yoga. It's a self-repelling practice. It will take us deeper. It will take us into greater challenges. But it will take us into the challenges that we have demonstrated to ourselves and to all these layers of our being that really we are ready for and we are longing for. And sometimes that will be much more than our mind would think. Sometimes people say the soul is way ahead of the mind. And the body also does not lie. So when we start to cultivate this cohesion of thought, word, and deed, it helps us connect more to the wisdom and the GPS guidance system of our bodily vehicle and the intelligence that is part and parcel of our senses that have evolved over millennia. Sometimes people talk about the sixth sense, or they talk about intuition, the deep intuitive wisdom. There's the idea in yoga, when we bring all the members of the gang of our being, our sense powers, our bodily powers, our mental focus, our intellect, our emotional sensitivity, we bring all these powers into togetherness and line them up, that's going to give us much clearer access to that deep intuitive wisdom that can help us act in the ways that are most attuned to our deepest longings and simultaneously will be most supportive of harmony, not just at the microcosmic level, but also emanating out around us. So this path is one that requires faith and courage, but it is its own reward. Thank you.